It's Tuesday night, Channel 95, 7 o'clock at night. We're back for one more show of the neighborhood news. We're celebrating 4 years next month. So thank you for being with us. And remember, if you are watching this show and it's not a Tuesday night, it's because just like city council meeting keeps repeating and repeating and repeating. So come back for the new show next Tuesday here on this channel at 7 o'clock at night. For our Portuguese listeners that I know, they are out there, and even back in Portugal, they are listening to our show. Sejam bem-vindos para mais programa de notícias da sua vizinhança. Aqui no canal 95, às 7 da noite, todas as terças-feiras, nós trazemos novo programa para si. E hoje vamos estar falando aqui de história de Fall River com a nossa convidada, Stefani Koorey. That's the only thing you understood, right?
Yes,
Stefani Koorey.
Yes. It's a difficult language.
It is. It is.
It is. I detect some Spanish, but you know, it's influences that I can pick up a word here and there, but it's a very complicated language.
It's like me talking Chinese. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
For you guys to pick up Portuguese, it's like me trying to. Yeah.
Yeah, I like listening to it.
Our guest today is Stefani Koorey. She knows a lot about history, especially I think you very familiar with the Fall River history.
Yes, yes.
She's out of a couple of books, 3 now?
More than that, but a new one.
Okay, I know 3.
Okay.
But I was lucky enough to get one signed by her.
See?
That I'm going to tell my daughters to save it next to my important papers because it will be worth it millions and 100 years down the road.
Thank you. Maybe not, but thank you. The new book comes out June 6th. And there'll be a book signing at the Fall River Historical Society on the 12th, which is a Sunday from noon to 3. And it's called The Historic Fires of Fall River. Oh, and it's interesting that we just had another major mill fire in the city. Luckily, it was unused. It was uninhabited. So there's no one out of work because of it. But so many fires in the city of Fall River destroyed lives. Not people. There's only one real major fire in the city in 1874 where people died, mostly women and children. The Granite Mill Fire of 1874. 23 women and children died by jumping out of the windows. Yeah, jumping out of the 5th floor attic windows of the Granite Mill. Most other fires, though, remarkably, there's no casualties in the city. So that's the good news about the book.
Yeah,
Fall River has a lot of fires. It's according to Chief Louis Shea, who was a Fall River chief of the fire department at one time, he said that Fall River is a city built to burn. So expect more. And I think that's why the people in the South End are so worried about the King Philip Mill, because they know that if the wind is wrong, you know, or right as the fire would want it, it could wipe out great swaths of neighborhoods. So, and it's unkept. So those are the most dangerous buildings, the abandoned buildings.
This last fire that we got a couple of weeks ago, if you had, if you are going through your book now, and probably you will make it into the book because I think it was an historical. You think it will be an historical fire?
It's one of the significant fires of the city, but it's not one that is something that somebody was going to write about, because when I did a chronological list of all the significant fires of Fall River's history, there were over 100. Wow. And that's school buildings, mill buildings, all kinds of fires with loss of life, you know, and Dave Jennings, who's, you know, Dave from the Lafayette Durfee House, he's a former lieutenant of the fire department, and he did the foreword for the book. And he taught me about firefighting. He taught me, you know, I never thought about it. I never thought about it. You call the fire department, they come, they hook up a hose, they squirt water, and you know, that's what you think. Oh my gosh, no. Oh, there's so much more to it. And it's very expensive. And there's only 3 ways to kill a fire. And it's either it all burns up and there's no more something to burn, or if they, sort of smother the fire. And I can't remember what the third one is off the top of my head, but there's only 3 ways to kill a fire.
Oh, wow.
And then the apparatus, you've got hose, trucks that have hoses, hose trucks. You have ladder trucks. You have water. I mean, there's the apparatus that goes to a fire that depends on the kind of fire and what they bring to it. And then all the communities band together in order to assist, like what happened here on Weaver Street.
Right.
There were
Somerset.
multiple communities there. Yeah. So the history of the fires of Fall River is in 1843, with the first big significant fire, 20% of the population at that time was homeless because of the fire. I mean, can you imagine if that happened today? 20% of 88,000 people. I mean, of course, it was a much smaller scale back then, but fires in Fall River are devastating. They're very hard to fight. What the firefighters end up doing, like this last one, is they try to save the buildings surrounding it. You can't stop a mill fire.
Right.
And I think the our location makes us a difference. We're not an island, but we board a lot of water, and a lot of winds pick up.
And
more
we're high up.
Exactly.
We're on a granite ledge that's 122 feet elevation high. So the southwesterly winds come in and just fan those flames and spread it quickly from roof to roof to roof to roof. And unless you have proper firefighting equipment, I mean, a lot of times firefighters are just putting out the little fires that are a mile away, caused by a fire.
Yeah.
So it's one of the things that affected your neck of the woods was the Notre Dame fire.
Which the anniversary is coming up too, right? I think was
87.
April. I think was April 4th or something like that.
It was a horrible fire. Just the headline in the Herald News the next day was "The Day the City Wept," and you just get chills because it's like it destroyed so much of people's, I don't know, lives in that magnificent structure. And I never was fortunate enough to see it. I came to Fall River after.
Even today, that little plaza that we have on Pleasant Street came to replace a bunch of houses that burned down. That whole block over there.
Yes, there were lots of people homeless from that.
And that's where they built that. That's what the Joseph Hair Salon is.
Yeah.
All that plaza over there, it's a new construction because that whole block burned down. From the street from St. Joseph all the way
it
down to
created what's
Pleasant
called a
Street.
firestorm, and it was its own weather pattern. And it was like, as Dave describes it, because he was fighting that fire, that the wind went this way and the fire went this way, and then it just created this circular firestorm. And they were afraid it was going to cross the street, and in fact it did cross Pleasant Street a little bit. But they were fighting marsh fires over by the highway till well into the night because of the flying embers and when the steeples fell and the
I mean, must be quite a scene back then.
Yeah.
It had to be quite a scene.
Well, luckily there was a lot of eyewitness testimony, eyewitness accounts.
Right.
The newspapers, from the Boston Globe to the Providence newspaper to New Bedford to the Fall River newspapers, really, this was a community story. So they interviewed everybody. I know, people who lost everything to people who lived in the area to people who, were familiar. And so I was able to craft sort of a rich telling of that fire from the moment, from before, from the building of the structure, and the art that was included in that, and the community involvement in that, even to the Flint affair, which was the controversy where they hired, after the original French-Canadian curate of that, pastor of that church, died, and they hired an Irishman to come in and be the priest, and all of that happened that caused so much trouble, where they fought with Rome and they sent emissaries to Rome, and in order to get back their French-Canadian heritage. So it's a very, very strong French-Canadian idea of that. And Fall River is an amalgam of so many different cultures, and and luckily that food of all of those cultures is delicious. So I think food, culture.
It's funny.
Oh wait, speaking of which, I brought you each a present.
Oh.
Yes, I brought you each sweetbread from Cinderella's Bakery that on the corner of Pierce and Main Street. So this is for you, Cinderella.
It's Main
and Pierce. It's the best. So each of you
Okay.
has your own sweetbread. I go there all the time for my sweetbread.
That's so funny.
And that's the one with
baked
the
today.
egg. That's the
the
Easter.
Easter.
Yes.
Yes. It's delicious.
My grandmother used to cook it back in Portugal, and she used to make the dolls for us.
Yeah.
She would roll the doll and make like a doll and put the egg on the head. And we were looking for with a doll shape. And we were looking for all the time for the Easter.
That's so
because that's what we had for gift was a doll made in
They make
sweetbread.
the best sweetbread, I think. But
Really?
I'm not Portuguese, so you'll have to tell me if you agree.
We'll definitely test that out.
But that's for you.
worry.
I always think that you should bring something when you're invited somewhere. You should bring a gift.
Thank you. Thank
That
you.
is Portuguese tradition. There you go.
Yeah. I know you small one's going to be all over
my
the
kids,
egg.
my kids love it. Yeah, my kids
It's
love it.
great with tea and coffee.
Let me just ask you this. I do with kids on the neighborhoods a tour
Right.
with a trolley.
Yes, so you go up into the
Yes. I go to the reservation, but I do a monument for Day of Portugal. I do a monument. And
Monument tour.
yes, and I include the Lafayette. And I had a couple of teachers telling me a couple of stories about Lafayette.
It's all apocryphal. Don't believe anything anybody says, because everybody's got a different story about why Lafayette was facing one direction and facing the other. And they swear they saw the people pick it up and move it.
Oh, no.
And it's not possible. It's too heavy. So it's still sort of a mystery, but according to my sources, it was a matter of cleaning it and repairing the base, and it just got turned around when that happened. It wasn't a shun to Cody over there, the piano maker.
Facing the back to
The back
the
end of
Portuguese community and all of that. So
no, but there was a great like back and forth between the Lafayette statue, the French Canadians, and the Portuguese with Prince Henry.
Prince Henry.
So what they would do was the Portuguese in history, in not too long ago, would go to Lafayette and they would put like wrap it in like toilet paper, right?
Oh, really?
So like they would wrap him up and just make it terrible. And then the French Canadians would come to Prince Henry, who looks like he's sitting on a, on a
because
john.
it's only,
and they would like put like dog around the outside on the ground. So it was this back and forth neighborhood thing, which is pretty funny. That is true. That did happen.
The fire station on Pleasant Street. Is that the first or one of the first fire stations on the city?
No, it was one of the very first was down in where the city hall, right behind the city hall. That's one of
Bedford Street?
Well, yeah, but it's not there. It's not really there.
The building
anymore.
is not there
No,
anymore.
because when City Hall was gone, that was taken away. In my book, I have tons of pictures, so you'll be able to see where these are. And there's a great book on the history of the fire department by Fire Chief Lynch, and it was written like in 1890. Okay, so it talks about the very first fire station, the very first apparatus, the very first, and I have a list of all the fire chiefs in Fall River, the historical list of when they served. So there is a lot of that detail about where these things were. The mills themselves, when they were big enough, would have their own fire fighting team. They would have their own water supplies, their own cisterns, their own ability to try to put out the fire on their own location. They'd also ask for the assistance, of course, of the city fire department. But originally, Fall River Fire Department was volunteer, as it was a small community at the time. And they had their own fire buckets that were yellow, made of leather with their name on them.
interesting.
So, but by volunteering to be a fireman, you were able to not have to pay your poll tax, which is your voting price. Poll taxes existed well into the beginning of the 20th century. So that costs money to vote. And so they waived the poll tax for you to be a volunteer in the fire department. But if you didn't show up when there was a fire, you were fined. So it was kind of this situation. It was interesting kind of dynamic
absolutely.
there. But they were very proud to be firemen, and city fathers were also, honorary firemen with their buckets, and they would have to do the water and throw the water out the buckets. So it was very ineffective way to fight fires, but they did what they could. And Fall River has, had its financial difficulties, and buying apparatus that's current to the technology to fight the certain kinds of fires that we have in Fall River, it's very expensive. Just the life-saving gear that the firefighters have to wear, to the actual apparatus. I mean, there's some very old fire trucks in the system, and I know that the city council and the mayor is working to make sure that we're protected.
Right.
But once a mill fire starts,
Yeah.
you just protect the outside
Yeah, exactly.
world.
And that's what they did, and I have to commend them. They did a great job this last mill
I wish
fire.
I had known about it when it was going on. I would have.
Oh my goodness, it was all over Facebook. I
know, but I was asleep. You know what I mean? It's like one of those things where
the
I
normal
wanted.
person is sleeping.
After writing a book about it,
Yeah, exactly.
I wanted to sort of experience it, since it happened, to go there and.
Well,
and
those videos that I
Yeah.
saw on Facebook, let me tell you, it was like as if I was there. I mean, in the wind that day too,
Yeah.
it was just bringing those flames. You could just see it. Me and my husband, that Saturday morning, I said, well, the fire's not going on. I said, but let's drive by it. All you saw was the smoke coming into Somerset. I was like, wow.
It's weird because we didn't
This
smell
is
it. You don't smell it
amazing.
up by Charlton. It was going all the other way.
It was going across the river into Somerset. And I actually have friends in Somerset. And on Monday morning, I get to work and I said, hey, did you guys smell all that smoke? Was it pretty dark in Somerset? They had no clue what was going on. They said, we smelled smoke. They had ashes on their car, but they had no idea what was going on. And I'm like, Jesus, right across the river, guys, there was a fire. There was a fire. That was the reason for all that soot you had on your cars. But it was crazy.
Well,
It was amazing.
All the big fires in Fall River, say the 1916 fire, the 1928 fire, the Firestone Fire 41, people came from all over to watch those fires.
No kidding.
There were the highway, the road leading into Fall River from every direction was completely filled. That they had to create, a pass lane for the other communities to send their apparatus to Fall River. But there were hundreds of thousands of people witnessing the 1928 fire and its aftermath. In fact, one smart kid said, well, what we need to do is charge them all a dime, to come in, and then we'd make a whole lot of money because there were people everywhere. And cops were answering. One police officer said, oh, I answered 9,364,275 stupid questions.
One more thing that I would like to ask you is about the river. That you found out anything about the river, that they had to move it and put
Quicksand River?
put it into pipes, and you think that one day that could be.
I believe that Mayor Correa will be making a priority, I think, of daylighting the Quequechan. Of course, that has to be they have to study to make sure it's possible. I think it would remove the Chamber of Commerce building because that's where it
it's right
flows,
underneath it, yeah.
So but it would create such a pride, I think, again. It was filthy when they put it underground because it had been polluted for so long by the mills and the privies that were over, actually dumping human waste into the river. But it's probably cleaned itself out with the flow underground, and it hasn't been disturbed. So I think it would be, when people come to Fall River, I take them to the three little spots where you can actually see them.
see them.
Where you can still see the water. That's the Quequechan River, that's the Fall River, So I think it might actually happen. I think it would bring a lot of people to the city and create a kind of a park-like atmosphere. You know, restore that sort of downtown gorgeous beauty that people lost when they felt that the city hall was taken from them to build the highway.
Yeah.
You know, people still regret that.
Right.
Because this highway was supposed to bring people to Fall River, and all it does is send people through Fall River.
Yeah, right.
You know, so there's got to be a way to have them get off the highway and come and see us.
I have the same feeling about 79.
Yeah, me too.
I don't know your opinion, but I think 79 was created just to get people faster through Fall
Well,
River.
if you think about it, we have a road that goes all the way around the city, right? Now, and if they got rid of 79, which they won't, I mean, they could still use 24 to get to where they wanted to go, and make this all like smaller streets so that it's more community. But when they put in 79, how many triple deckers did they tear down there on Duval? And I mean, how it was destroyed for that highway. It's a silly highway.
Right.
It's a silly highway, but progress.
Yeah.
People went to work every day. The other thing that I'm involved with right now is my new neighbor. I live next door to Maplecroft, which is Lizzie Borden's home, following her acquittal, and she lived there with her sister from 1893. Lizzie lived there until 1927 when she died, and I live in the house next door that Lizzie owned as well. That's where I live. But my new neighbor, Christy Bates, has purchased Maplecroft and is what do you call it? Not rehabbing. It's she's making it authentically Lizzie's time inside, and it's amazing. And I think she hopes to open for tours and special events. So that's going to bring tourism to the city.
That's interesting, yeah.
Big time, because you have 2nd Street, which is before, right, and during, and then after. So it'll create the Historical Society in the middle, right? So you've got 2nd Street, Historical Society, Maplecroft, and Oak Grove. It'll be a lot for people to come and visit. It's
One
going
big
to be
tour.
Yes, it's going to be great.
On the location on 2nd Street, what is authentic there from?
The building,
No. I'm
Big
talking
time.
about
the floors,
inside.
you know, none of the furniture.
Furniture, carpets.
No, it's restored to its authentic time in most cases. They are a museum, and they do tours. They also are the scene of a crime, and it's, I think, one of the only, if not one of the few, locations of a murder that still exists, where you can go and tour it and actually sleep there. So for people who are interested, armchair detectives, people who are interested in the case, people who are interested in Lizzie, when you walk into that house, it really forms your understanding of space and how these people lived on top of each other, and sort of
very small.
And but it's really a nice house inside. It's very nice.
Never.
Yeah,
You
never
should
there.
really do a tour.
never been
You
either,
should really do a tour.
Yeah,
It's
never.
well worth the tour. It is well worth the tour. They do a fabulous job at 2nd Street. So there's that, you know, and then there'll be Maplecroft. So, and finally we have the chamber interested in this tourism idea with Lizzie Borden, which is great.
Yeah.
Yeah, so finally she'll come out of the dark and sort of out of the shadows and into the, Fall River is also about Lizzie Borden.
Yeah, because, I mean, I think the story already got so many twists.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the story, especially after this last movie that was done.
And there's a new series coming out.
Oh, see?
It's like an HBO thing. I mean, it's going to be...
Everybody's making money with this.
Yes.
Only Fall River.
Only Fall River
Fall
isn't.
River doesn't.
Well, they can't film it here. They film it in Canada. They film stuff elsewhere.
Yeah,
and
you're
they
right.
make these houses that don't look anything like Fall
it.
River,
I know.
right?
I
And then we're watching it going, oh, no, that's, no.
Yeah, exactly.
But the Elizabeth Montgomery movie, which became, you know, The Legend of Lizzie Borden in the 70s, which was the movie about Lizzie Borden, her house was brick. I mean, but it was a great movie.
They did a good job with it. I'll have to agree with you. Yeah, I'll have to agree with you.
It really
Well,
sparked everybody's interest in the case, big time.
And I'm sure they got more tours because of it at that point. Yeah.
Well, the house wasn't open until '96. It was always a private residence. That's the thing. These houses that Lizzie owned were private residences up until the time they were open to the public. That's why they're still there. Normally, those things are torn down to make way for whatever, right? Maplecroft was a private residence all this time.
Wow.
2nd Street was a private residence until 1996.
And this was the only 3 properties that she owned?
She 2 properties. She owned
2nd Street.
Second Street, and she continued to own it afterwards, and then finally sold it. She rented out the rooms, rented out the floors, and Maplecroft. She never left the city. If she never left the city, there has to be a reason why she stayed, right? She must have loved this town.
Oh, of course.
Think about it. So you can tap into Lizzie's love of Fall River.
Yeah.
And she was acquitted. As I tried to tell,
point,
yes.
You tried to.
I tried to make that point before.
Right.
Yeah. Talking about churches.
Yes.
What can you tell us the oldest churches?
Oh, the oldest churches are gone. I mean, the primary old churches are gone. The Central Congregational Church, which was Lizzie's church for a while, where the Abbey Grill was.
Exactly.
It's got a coming soon sign out front, and has a great hall with a lot of stained glass. That's where Aerosmith did their their music video. So I think it'll be an event location and a restaurant, and it's going to be magnificent. I don't even know the name of the man who purchased it or the company, but he's done magnificent restoration on that building.
Awesome.
It is gorgeous. You drive by it and you're like, wow, like it's really a lot of money was poured into that. And I can't wait for it to open.
Right.
For whatever reason. I mean,
Right.
it used to be a restaurant and a culinary institute.
Yes.
Yes.
And then a rental hall for the Great Hall, but that's on the horizon. So you've got that too. So you can add that into the Lizzie tour, and we can do your trolley ride.
And it is, and you have a tour for Lizzie.
It can be easily put together. Each house, like the Historical Society has a tour of their collection. The 2nd Street has their own tour of their house, and eventually soon, hopefully Christy will have a tour of Maplecroft set up that you can go and be inside the house, which has not been open to the public until now. So,
are we expecting? Should we expect another book?
oh yeah. I had so much fun writing this book. I've been researching actually Bridget Sullivan, who was the Borden maid, and her life and the Irish presence in Fall River and immigration of Irish into Fall River, and then her immigration back over to Butte, Montana, which is where a large enclave of Irish lived. So I'm interested in her story, and I've been in contact with family members who are still alive.
Interesting.
Because she died in 1947. She was 1947. She was the youngest directly involved in the case. So she lived into more current times. So there's people who know her and are still alive.
Wow.
So I really want to explore her story, even if it leads me just into an Irish immigration story, because I think that would be fascinating.
Interesting.
Very good. So, and we out of time. Half an hour went by fast. I have to thank our guest, Stefani, for coming down, and do me a favor.
Yeah.
Study some mayors. I want to go. I see the city chamber.
Yeah.
Full of pictures.
Yes.
But we don't know nothing about them.
And some of them are quite valuable, by the way, because some of them are quite valuable.
So think about that.
Yeah. They need to be identified.
And
Yeah,
I
a
see
little
you
fun.
next week.
Yeah.
Thank you.